Hello and welcome to the Legends of Chess Tournament 2020 featuring 10 of the legends of modern chess. The tournament is the fourth stage of Magnus Carlsen Chess Tour. The tournament consists of two stages, a 10 player preliminary where each player will play each other once followed by a knockout among the top four. Preliminaries are played as four-game rapid matches, while the knockout will be the best of three such matches. So the time control is 15 minutes for all moves with a 10-second increment from move 1. So in this video we'll be analyzing one of the interesting game from the first round, and it is the second game played between Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri. The first game was a draw between the two, and so let's see if Magnus can repeat the magic with the white pieces in the second game. So playing with the white pieces, Carlsen goes for d4 and knight to f6 replies Anish. c4 and e6. Now knight to f3 and d5. We are now having a Queen's Gambit decline game on the board, and knight to c3 and bishop to b4. Anish goes for the Rogozin variation, and now bishop to g5 and h6 by Anish. So instead of playing the usual bishop to h4 move here, Carlsen decides to go to bishop to d2. And then Anish decides to castle on the king side, and then comes g4. Here Carlsen is sacrificing a pawn to further develop his pieces. So Anish decides to take the knight on c3, bishop into c3 and bishop into c3 and knight to e4. He's targeting the bishop on c3. So now queen to c2 and c5, further developing his pieces. So Magnus decides to take the pawn d into c5 and b6. Now g5. Carlsen wants to open the g file and further attack. So here Anish decides to take the g5 pawn offer by playing h into g5 and then h4. Here Carlsen wants to get an open file on g4 and h4, but Anish is not interested in giving an open file, so he plays g4, attacking the knight on f3. So knight goes to g5, and here Anish decides not to take the knight on g5 with the e4. So instead what he played here is f5. So in reply, Magnus plays bishop to g2 and into c5. So here Carlsen now decides to castle on the queen side. It's a wonderful move because in this position Anish cannot play d into c4 because of the rook on d1. So queenside castling was a better move here by Carlsen. So now Anish decided to take the knight on g5 by knight into g5 and h into g5. So here you can see Magnus is getting an open rook file. So the position is favoring white. So here Anish wins back the pawn by playing queen into g5 with a check. So king goes to b1 and knight to d7, further developing. Carlsen decided to take the d5 pawn, c into d5. Instead of taking e into d5 and bringing the rook into the game, what I need to play knight to b6. So instead of playing d6, here Carlsen goes for d into e6. The rook is under threat, but Anish is not bothered about giving a rook for a bishop, so he plays bishop into e6, and Carlsen decided to take Carlsen decided to take the rook on a8 by playing bishop into a8 and rook into a8. Now queen to d2. Carlsen is offering a queen trade, but Anish is not interested in trading the queen, so he plays queen to g6 and now queen to d6. Now f4. It's a discovered check here. So king goes to a1 and rook to f8. And here Carlsen misses a wonderful chance to win the game easily. What Carlsen play here is queen to e5 in reply to rook to f8. But the better move here was rook to h8 check, because if and rook to h8, and the only move here black can play is king into h8, and then queen into f8 check and king to h7. The only move is black is forced to play king to h7. Now rook to h1 check, and the only move here black can play is queen to h6. Rook takes h6 queen with a check and king into h6. King into h6 and queen into g7 check and king to h5 and bishop to f6. Here, after that, Carlsen can easily win the game. What Carlsen played was queen to e5. So in reply, Anish goes for g3, further advancing his pawns. Now f takes the g3. What Anish plays here is knight to c4, attacking the queen. So queen plays queen to h5. Here Carlsen offers a queen trade. So now Anish goes for the trading of queens, queen into h5 and rook into h5, knight to e3 attacking the rook. So rook goes to g1 and bishop to f5. So with this bishop to f5, a wonderful defensive move here. He plays b3 because knight to c2 check is a threat. So Carlsen plays b3 here. Now Anish decided to take the g3 pawn, f into g3, and rook takes the g3 pawn and bishop to g4 attacking rook on h5. Now rook takes the c5 pawn, rook into c5, and then comes rook to f1 check. Now king to b2, knight to d1 check, king to a3. Now knight takes the bishop on c3 and rook into g4. So it was in this position that Anish resigned the game, because white can easily win the game from this position with the 3 pawns and rook and rook against knight and rook. So it was a wonderful game by Magnus. He won the second game. So hope you all enjoyed.